When astronauts land on Mars, a couple of decades from now, perhaps, they'll need to find a way to communicate with each other, with equipment on and around the planet, and with mission control back on Earth. Despite living so far from home, they'll no doubt want to connect with loved ones, keep their playlists up to date or stream the latest episodes of their favorite shows. But setting up a Wi-Fi connection to Earth's internet won't be an option. Earth is simply too far away, around 55 million to 400 million kilometers, depending on where the planets are in their orbits. Spacefarers will need another strategy. Establishing a good communications infrastructure is essential for human missions to Mars, says Claire Parfit, a systems engineer with the European Space Agency, or ESA, who is based in Noordwijk, Netherlands. At the moment, we're in the early stages of working out what that means. Researchers are testing ways to upgrade existing networks, along with some far-out alternatives. For example, NASA's Psyche mission, which lifted off in October with the job of exploring an asteroid between Mars and Jupiter, will also test interplanetary communication using lasers. Lasers could carry far more data than the radio waves that have been used from the earliest days of space travel. No known strategies can get rid of the time lag in communications between Earth and Mars. A message moving at the speed of light takes anywhere between 4 and 24 minutes for a one-way trip. In other words, a quick ping to mission control is out of the question, not to mention a WhatsApp call home. There's also the issue of solar conjunction, says Parfit, when the Sun comes between Earth and Mars. This happens for a couple of weeks every 2 years or so, cutting off communications between the planets. The last one took place in November. But new approaches could open possibilities that make communications on Mars more akin to what we experience here on Earth. At least one research team has wondered, what if Mars had its own internet? How Mars communication works today. Several space agencies have landers, rovers and satellites already at Mars that have to communicate with Earth. Consider NASA's Perseverance rover. It sends and receives two kinds of information. One is command and telemetry, where operators on Earth send instructions, receive information and make decisions on what to do next. Percy typically receives over 1,000 commands from Earth every day. The second is the science data, pictures of Martian rocks, for example, that Percy collects. The helicopter Ingenuity, which ended its mission earlier this year, also regularly pinged the rover, which served as a base station to relay data and commands between Ingenuity and Earth. Orbiters circling the planet, including NASA's Mars Odyssey and Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, or MRO, and ESA's Trace Gas Orbiter, or TGO, similarly send science data back home. A lot of the communication with Mars is routed through the Mars Relay Network in what NASA describes as a tightly choreographed dance. This network of 5 orbiters around Mars, MRO, TGO, MAVEN, Mars Odyssey and Mars Express, transmits information via antennas pointed toward Earth. A rover that needs to send its latest observations back to Earth first passes the data along to one of the orbiters using ultra-high-frequency radio transmissions. If that orbiter doesn't have a line of sight to Earth, it can hold on to the information until it does. The data are then relayed toward Earth, where powerful radio antennas distributed across the globe are always listening for pings from deep space. Once a human crew lands on Mars, this system will not be good enough. Vincent Chan, a researcher in fiber optic and satellite communications at MIT, doesn't foresee local, on-the-ground communication as a challenge. A Martian crew can interact using radio frequency and existing wireless technologies, he says. 2 mini cell towers would be enough when the astronauts are close together, and a relay of some kind could be used when the astronauts are far enough apart that messages have to be sent over the horizon. People living in remote regions of Earth communicate in a similar way all the time. Those services are already in play, Chan says, and very economical. A big antenna on the crew's landing vehicle, pointed toward Earth, would probably be the very first infrastructure Martian explorers would set up, Chan says. But then things could get more challenging. When that ground-based antenna doesn't have a direct line of sight, astronauts could use orbital relays akin to the Mars Relay Network to communicate with Earth. Several orbiters would have to be available for round-the-clock coverage, and they'd need to be optimized for heavy data transfer. ESA is currently looking at making today's relay network more robust. It is in the early stages of considering a concept called the Mars Communication and Navigation Infrastructure, or Marconi. If it moves forward, the project will develop a set of communication and navigation-related payloads that could piggyback on any mission headed to Mars. Once deployed into orbit, these payloads would act as nodes to provide radio communication on and with Mars, Parfit explains. They could then stick around for use on future missions. The more mass you land, the more expensive it is, so you wouldn't necessarily want to land massive communication systems on Mars every time, she says. Though traditional radio frequencies would suffice for low data rates, using a laser link could carry 10 to 100 times as much data in the same time frame. Because of the higher frequencies of optical waves, hundreds of thousands of times those of radio waves, much more information can be packed in. Thus, this type of optical signal is just where space communication may be headed.